Sinuyod ng mga tauhan ng Social Security System o SSS ang ilang establisimento sa Mandaluyong, Makati at Maynila kaninang umaga. Dala nila ang mga show cause order. Pinagpapaliwanag ang nasa 25 employer na ayon sa SSS ay hindi tumatalima sa pagbabayad ng kontribusyon. Sa Mandaluyong, isa sa 11 employer ang may mahigit 14 na milyong piso ang amount of delinquency o kulang sa hulog. Iintindihan ng SSS ang sitwasyon ng mga employer ngayon. Pero kakibat naman ng hindi paghulog ay ang benepisyong posibleng hindi matanggap ng kanilang mga empleyado. Sa Maynila, isang printing studio ang hinabol dahil sa halos 6.8 million pesos na unpaid premiums. Sa Makati City Business District, 6 na delinquenteng employer ang sinampulan ng SSS. Ang mga ito, ilang taon raw nang may pending na reklamo sa hindi pagbabayad ng kontribusyon. Isa-isang inakyat ng team ang bawat business establishment na target ng operasyon. Babala nila sa mga employer na hindi magbabayad.
So if these employers will be found guilty later on, ang imposable penalty naman natin ay 6 years, 1 day to 12 years. So that's a non-probationable offense.
Nakasalalay po sa kontribusyon ng employer at pagbabayad po nila ang mga benepisyo na para sa mga empleyado nila.
Higit sa 8,000 ang business establishment sa lugar kung saan operasyon ng SSS sa Makati. At ayon sa barangay, mahalaga sa kanila na tumatalima sa batas ang mga nagnenegosyo sa kanilang lugar.
Kasi we have more than 8,000 businesses. And we would want them to succeed. Okay? And we wouldn't want any business in Barangay San Lorenzo to be falling prey to this kind of case involving SSS.
Binigyan ng mga employer ng mga opsyon upang makapagbayad ng kanilang mga delinquency. Isa na rito ang Pandemic Relief and Restructuring Program.
We will offer to our employers na kung medyo malaki yung delinquency mo, you can avail of this program para hindi masyadong mabigat at hindi maka-apekto doon sa operation.
Maraming nagtatanong, paano ba nangyari na si Mrs. Aquino naging presidente? Well, those who were born or already voting at the time, not born, pero yung mga nag-participate na during the snap elections na ang tawag in 1986. And that was the time na tumakbo si President Marcos for the snap elections and Mrs. Aquino was the other candidate from the opposition. Yan yung opposition was the Laban. Yan yung mga Liberal Party, yung mga opposition against the Marcoses. So, siya ang pinili na kandidato. Early on, they had, of course, several personalities that were suggested, and one of them was Salvador Laurel. But then Mrs. Aquino had some kind of an emotional contempt as far as her candidate is concerned because of what happened to her husband who was shot at the tarmac, that is Senator Benigno Aquino at the time. Kaya siya ang napili ng opposition. Pero paano ba siya naging presidente? That is the question, one of the first questions that they raised to me na tinanong. So, nagpatawag kasi ng snap elections si President Marcos, so why did he have to call for a snap elections when his term of office would have ended in 1987? Kaya hindi na niya kailangan na magpatawag pa ng eleksyon ng 1986. 1985 nung nagpatawag siya, 1986 yung snap elections. But there was pressure. There was pressure coming from the United States of America. Yan talaga klaro, sapagkat nakita natin na nagkaroon ng maraming bisita na pumunta dito. Senators, former ambassadors, former members of the Pentagon, officials, lahat yan. Nagpunta dito, kinausap si President Marcos, etc. and all of that. They wanted him to form some kind of a coalition government or to step down at, maraming suggestions. Prior to the snap elections, there was already the propaganda machinery. Magaling sila dyan sa kanilang media. They control the Western press. They also control most of the media here in our country kasi ganun talaga ang may hawak ng ating media network, tinatawag ka the oligarchs, Ayan, mga opposition against Marcos. Ayaw nila yung ginawa ni Marcos na magkakaroon ng urban land reform, tapos yung land reform din, maraming nawalan ng kanilang mga asyenda and so forth, and many other things besides. So that was what happened, and that pressure actually had President Marcos telling Ambassador Habib and Paul Lacson that you cannot tell me how I would run my country better than I would. But be that as it may, talagang nagkaroon ng malaking pressure until there was this interview with David Brinkley in this television program, and that was when, with certain questions that were already programmed for President Marcos to give an answer, sinabi na niya, okay, I will call for a snap elections come next year. Kasi the interview was done sometime in November. Mrs. Marcos at the time was coming home from Moscow after the consecration of Our Lady of Fatima's image and Our Lady of Peace in the St. Louis Cathedral in Moscow. Pauwi na kami noon. I was covering Mrs. Marcos then, and we were in Tokyo when President Marcos on live television here was interviewed by Mr. Brinkley, and that was where he announced in November 1985 that there will be snap elections in February 7, 1986. So yun ang nangyari. But prior to that, as I said, the machinery of propaganda and media was already running, and there was already the hovering albatross of all of these statements coming from everywhere that media was controlling na kung si Marcos ay tatakbo sa February 1986, mandadaya siya. There will be cheating that will be... So hindi pa nga nagsisimula yung campaign period ng February na yan, ng January and February. Ando na yung propaganda niyan. I am saying this in answer to a deja vu of what seems to be happening now, because lately, over the past week or so, we have been hearing, on social networking, that the opposition will not accept Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to win in this election or something, and they're already, there is already all of this movement that a massive electoral protest will be presented to the COMELEC, so that they're, because everybody says with all the surveys and all the indicators are saying that Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will win this coming election. So prior to that, ayan na, nakahanda na sila to protest the proclamation, to say that nandaya para siya manalo, because nakikita na natin yung trending as of now in social networking, in many of the statements being made by, of course, bloggers, etc., and all of that. So I'm mentioning this precisely because parang merong repeat performance of what it was in 1986, 36 years ago. So your question, whoever sent this question to me, not just one person but several, paano naging presidente si Mrs. Aquino? Well, by the hand of the most powerful country in the world at the time, yun ang nangyari. So President Marcos, passing through the legal procedure of the proclamation for the office of the presidency, dumaan yan sa tinatawag na National Board of Canvassers, which is Parliament. You must remember, at the time, we already had a Parliament. Hindi ito yung Congress ngayon na may mga lower chamber, mayroong upper chamber. Wala, isa lang yan. Just one legislative branch. This was during the time of President Marcos, and that was Parliament, the National Assembly. Kaya nga ang tawag dyan, Batasang Pambansa. That is the Filipino term for the National Assembly, and they comprise the National Board of Canvassers. So through the several days that according to the law, according to the fundamental law, they were canvassing the votes from all the regions. Diyan nagkaroon ng tinatawag na bilangan ng summary na ng boto. And despite the fact that you had several returns from this Board of Canvassers that were set aside, kasi you had one of the members of Parliament who was objecting to some of those returns. So tinabi yun, nilagyan ng asterisk, at saka na lang daw babasahin o saka na lang isasama sa total number of canvassed votes kasi merong question. So nilagyan ng asterisk. So despite the fact that may mga tinabi, and despite the fact na nagkaroon din ng Citizens Arm, which is the NAMPREL, na nagbilangan din doon sa Lasal Green Hills, despite the fact that all of this was happening, panalo pa rin yung sa canvassing of votes si President Marcos by about 1 million or so votes. At ito, na-declare hindi lang sa Commission on Elections, ngunit sa doon mismo sa Parliament, sa National Board of Canvassers. So he was declared and proclaimed the winner as President of the Republic of the Philippines for the snap elections. Pero nag-object yung grupo ni Mrs. Aquino. Sabi nila, dinaya sila. At they did not accept the fact na constitutionally and legally, Marcos was the elected president. So what did they do? Yan, nag-rally sila all over the country kung saan-saan. After February 7 elections, sangkatutak na mga rally ang kanilang ginawa, objecting to the proclamation of President Marcos. But nonetheless, President Marcos took his oath of office as President of the Republic. Sinabayan naman ni Mrs. Aquino sa Club Filipino. Nag-oath of office din siya. Not according to the Constitution that she should have followed, which is our Philippine Constitution, but according to what her legal advisors and her opposition group determined as mag-ano rin siya, mag-oath. And of course, she was supported by the United States of America bureaucracy. That is the office of Secretary Schultz. Nasulat na yan by Secretary Schultz himself sa kanyang libro. Sinulat niya yung procedure na yung pag-proclaim kay Mrs. Aquino. So to answer your question, yung sinabi niyo paano ba siya naging presidente, yun ang nangyari. She was supported by the United States of America when she took her oath of office, and then, so dalawa na yung presidente, anong gagawin? Well, there was already this threat that came, not just by words, but a physical threat. And it so happened that we were there in Malacanang when two helicopters were hovering over Malacanang and a bomb fell. So hindi naman talagang binagsak para patayin yung first family, pero panakot because they could have done it directly on the palace, on Malacanang itself. But it was within the vicinity, but loud enough and strong enough that we had to run, we had to scamper. From the ceremonial hall, we had to run to the study room. The chandeliers, yung mga nakapasok sa Malacanang, alam naman yung ang lalaki ng chandeliers yan. It's made of wood, pinagawa ni Mrs. Marcos yan sa paete. It's carved in wood. Yun ang malalaking chandeliers doon sa ceremonial hall. Talagang nagyanig, yumanig yun. Tapos yung mga kurtina talagang gumalaw and everything. So I was there. I heard the bomb. I felt the tremor and so forth. So yung panakot na yun, immediately after that, merong lumabas dun sa telefax kasi wala pang mga wala pa tayong tawag nito, yung mobile phone or so. So merong telefax na lumabas dun sa office ng information office. Merong lumabas na telefax na with the stationery and the letterhead of the United States Embassy, the Embassy of the United States of America, but it was unsigned. So ang nakasulat doon, I wish I had a copy here. I have a copy, but hindi ko kaharap ngayon. Sinasabi doon that if President Marcos would be attacked in Malacanang by the people or the opposition that is there in EDSA, you must remember mayroong mga nag-rally sa EDSA rin in support of Enrile and Ramos. So kung yung grupo na yon ay parating na sa Malacanang, at binomba na nga si Marcos doon, and he will retaliate with violence kung yung mga sundalo niya doon na nagpo-protection sa Malacanang, yung Presidential Security Group or whatever you would call them, papasok ang US Marines. Huwag siyang gumamit ng puwersa, that he should not use violence or force against the people that wala pa naman doon that will be coming over from EDSA to Malacanang. Ganon. So nakita ninyo na the process was already there. As a matter of fact, sinabi nga ni Secretary Schultz sa kanyang libro, it was not a matter of how to take him out. It was a matter of when. So nagintay lang ng timing. So yun na nga, kasi may mga sundalo si Enrile, tapos may mga tao dun sa EDSA, tapos binomba yung Malacanang. Pagkatapos sinabihan na kung magre-retaliate si Marcos ay papasok ang US Marines. Prior to that, you had on television, on live television, yung mga nahuli na mga members of the armed forces na mga kasamahan ni Enrile na gustong pumasok na ng Malacanang para i-hostage na yung first family. Pero na-aresto sila doon before they were able to get to Malacanang. So doon pa lang, nakikita mo na talagang merong movement na to remove the Marcoses. So nung na-aresto yon, ang sumunod naman na nangyari yun ang kinwento ko na nagbagsak sila ng 2 bomba. At pagkatapos ay sinabihan na through a telefax which was unsigned but with a stationery para alam ng mga tao ni President Marcos and he himself na galing sa embassy ng Amerika. So yun na nga ang sinabi. And then of course, there were conversations between him and Senator LACSON kasi hindi na siya makakonect kay President Reagan. President Reagan was already left in the dark by Secretary Schultz above everything else. They did not want Marcos to have a connection with President kasi kaibigan niya yun So siguro doon tatanungin ni President Marcos, what is this that's happening? So they kept him away from President Reagan at the time para magawa nila yung kanilang ginagawa precisely. So yun na, because of that threat precisely, baka naman talagang hindi lang bomba ang ihuhulog doon, baka whatever it is. And that is where President Marcos said, can you escort us? So ito to the American embassy officials, can you bring us now from Malacanang to my hometown in Lawag? Kasi while he is there is the threat na baka dumating yung US Marines, baka bombahin sila, baka pumasok yung mga tao from EDSA, and of course, to protect the family, the first family that they were there, and babies, yung mga bata pa yan sila, Borgie. So dun nga, Marcos decided na dalahin siya sa Lawag. But then, of course, at about 7:30 that evening of February 25, dinala siya sa Clark Air Base para magpahinga daw kasi 7:30 na ng gabi nung lumipad sila by helicopter to Clark. Well, about early morning, 3 or 4 o'clock. Ito na yung record ng kanyang aide-de-camp. This you can read from the book of Colonel Aroisa because he wrote about this in his book From Malacanang to Makiki. Makiki is the place in Honolulu where they were exiled. Pero sinulat nga ni aide-de-camp ni President Marcos na nung nasa Clark Air Base sila, early morning 3 or 4 o'clock, ginising sila, dinisarmahan sila kasi sila yung presidential security group protecting President Marcos and the family. So dinisarmahan sila at sinabihan sila that they are going to be flown out of Clark Air Base, and for this rather hilarious reason, kasi daw yung Clark Air Base kung nasaan si President Marcos ay napaligiran na ng NPA. So would you believe that? But that's exactly what was told to President Marcos, and it is written by his own aide-de-camp that they were surrounded. And President Marcos also executed an affidavit regarding that they were wakened at about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they were told that they had to be flown out of Clark Air Base because Clark was surrounded by the NPA, by the communists that would want to kill him. Can you imagine? The biggest military air base in our country, held by American troops and soldiers and officials, mapapaligiran ng NPA. Oh my goodness. Anyway, nung nilipad na sila out of Clark Air Base, and they were expecting President Marcos, the family, and the rest of those that were fetched by American vehicles, sila Mr. Cojuangco, the family of General Ver, and several others, including the staff of President Marcos. So when they were already airborne, doon na nga nagtaka si Mrs. Marcos kasi malapit lang naman kung eroplano ang Lawag Airport. Pero parang medyo matagal na silang lumilipad. So tinatanong niya sa piloto, bakit ang tagal na hindi pa sila naglalanding? Yung pala, they were already being brought to Guam. And of course, the rest is history. And so what happened? Mrs. Aquino entered Malacanang, and that was when she assumed the office of the presidency. So that answers your question. So now we ask, ano nangyari nung naging presidente na siya? Well, she had her own revolutionary government, although they did not want to call it that. So nag-appoint na siya ng kanyang mga members of the cabinet. Tapos anong ginawa niya? Ang unang ginawa niya ay pinatanggal niya lahat ng mga elected officials. Elected officials meaning hindi na nag-convene ang parliament. Lahat ng mga governors, mayors, yung mga elected officials sa local government, tinanggal niya. Tapos nag-appoint siya ng mga OIC, officers in charge. Kaya yan, yung mga tao na yan, sila na ngayon ang umunlad from 1986. Yan sila Binay, etc. Hindi ko nasasabihin pa yung mga iba. So that was how she assumed the office of the presidency. And the first thing she did was to sign an executive order creating an office that will sequester all the properties known to belong to the Marcoses. Ang kanyang unang statement doon sa kanyang executive order, whereas the Marcoses as family, associates, and friends amassed, nagkaroon sila ng maraming wealth from the Filipino people. So doon pa lang sa kanyang statement na yon, executive order number 1, sinabi na nagnakaw na sa taong bayan without the benefit of either due process or the law. Tinanong nila anong nangyari pagkatapos nung naging presidente na si Mrs. Aquino. So yun, nasabi ko na nga na tinanggal niya yung mga associated with Marcos, hindi lang sa mga local government units, pero sa mga government offices din, pati sa judiciary din. Anybody na inappoint ni Marcos, tanggal yan. Tapos yung mga sa military, kasi karamihan nga dyan, mga sinasabing Ilocano, lahat pinadala sa Mindanao, o so kung sa mga tinatawag na battle zones doon. Tapos there was this term they used at the time, the Yellow Army, na sila naman ang nag-take over ng military at the time. So ganun ang first actions na, and there was so much in media na kinargahan na nila, pinalaki na nila yung executive order number 1 na sinabi nga na ang daming ninakaw ni Marcos from the Filipino people. Pero kasi si Marcos napadpad na ng Honolulu, doon na siya nilipad, hindi nila, this is the other question. Bakit hindi nila kinasuhan si President Marcos dito sa Pilipinas? That's a good question. So questions that need answers. Why did they not file the cases against President Marcos? Unang-una, anong case ang kanilang ina-file? Graft and corruption. So kailangan nila ng mga ebidensya against the corruption of President Marcos na nagnakaw siya sa taong bayan. Pero natatakot sila at the time, or at least it appeared, that since the country was divided between the opposition and the Marcos loyalists, baka magkagulo. So America also decided na it would be best to help Mrs. Aquino na to litigate or to put on trial President Marcos kasi andun na siya sa Honolulu, doon na lang siya litisin. So they had to look for a law. Anong American law ang na-violate ni Marcos para kasuhan siya sa Amerika? Meron ba siyang Amerikanong pinatay? Meron ba siyang Amerikanong ninakawan? It had to be an American law so that he would be criminally indicted in America.